The FBI spied on John Lennon, and we also know that they have spied on Jimi Hendrix. But there are also rumors that they had a file on Pink Floyd, and they kept tabs on their performances because they thought they are subversive elements in their songs. Pink Floyd were not just a band that had hits, they had rebellion anthems that captured millions of people around the world. To the FBI, they were a threat. But if you look at their vault, which is publicly accessible database, and you search for any of these well-known cases of surveillance, you can find plenty of results. Here's, for example, for John Lennon. And if you open one of those files, you can see some very interesting things. The documents are heavily redacted, and there are plenty of parts which are blacked out, so you don't know what's underneath the pen, of course. But if you start reading some of these documents, they are just ridiculous. Look at this. It says, it is the latest album of John Lennon of the Beatles and his latest flair, if I can read correctly, Yoko Ono. The cover of the album was a photograph of Lennon and Ono completely nude. And believe us, they don't hide a thing. It is now being sold to our young people on the record stands. Mr. Nelson, and Mr. Nelson is mentioned here above, I think as a congressman or something. It is the most discolored and vulgar display of garbage I have ever seen in my life. Isn't there some way we can get this album off the market? It has to be sent in the mail to the stores, which in turn sell it to the kids. It does have an envelope over the picture when bought in the stores, so it's also fraudulent advertising. You ask why the youth of today are like they are. This is one of the prime reasons. Another, I say to you, this has to stop. And I mean now. Poor John and misunderstood art. For FBI, which was the agency that was obsessed with threat from all sides, inside and outside, Pink Floyd was not just a regular rock band. They were a potential threat. If you look at the way FBI operated, especially in those years, Pink Floyd was a perfect target for them. So today we'll try to unravel some more details about this and find out what is a rumor, what is true. Main reason why there is a great possibility that such a file exists is the director of FBI at the time, J. Edgar Hoover, a person who was obsessed with threats. He was a director of FBI for 50 years. He looked firsthand at the 60s and 70s chaos that civil rights movement made in the America and the Vietnam protests. And he saw a direct assault on America's traditional values. Hoover's weapon in this fight was the secret program of the FBI called COINTELPRO.
COINTELPRO was a massive government criminal operation directed against the population that went through 4 administrations.
Counterintelligence program. From 1956 to 1971, this legally murky operation targeted a huge number of Americans. And the tactics they used in that operation were very dirty. Wiretaps, opening mail, paid informants, and psychological warfare. All designed to neutralize influential voices in the music and literature and artists. So the FBI was not actively investigating only crimes. They were actively pursuing the ways to silence dissent. And in that pursuit, musicians were top priority. The FBI kept thick files on musicians like folk singer Pete Seeger and Phil Ochs, and also on, for example, Aretha Franklin, soul icon as she was. So why would FBI go to all these lengths to do all that? Because Hoover, he understood. He understood the power of music. He knew that politicians' speech can be forgotten in few days. But a good song can become a powerful anthem for a whole generation. So in FBI eyes, the influential rock artist was not just a rock star with a massive following. It was not just an entertainer. It was a political weapon. And in the 1970s, there were just a few bands maybe more influential than Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd didn't start just shouting political slogans on the stage from nowhere. I mean, they started on the London musical scene as a psychedelic rock band. But their sound became bigger and more influential, so the audiences became bigger. In 1973, when they issued Dark Side of the Moon, they became planetary popular rock band. So it wasn't just about selling records, it was cultural saturation in a way that their music was not just playing on the radio. It was playing in the dorm rooms, it was played at the parties, and it was in the ears of millions of young people. They were creating deep philosophical albums that made the young generation listen the whole album from start to finish, a concept album, and that way that made them think about themselves, about the world is surrounding them, and of course the society. And for the agencies like FBI or British counterpart MI5 or Special Branch, that was not very good. They were concerned with the band's ability to capture attention of younger people for such a long period of time. And with the albums in 1970s, the musical style became darker and more critical. So in the government's eyes, they became a threat that could not be ignored. The file on Pink Floyd was something very realistically possible. For example, there's a book by the author named Carl Dallas called Pink Floyd, Bricks in the Wall. The book connects Syd Barrett's mental decline to the government's research into mind control using drugs. This research, which was conducted by MI5 and CIA, was mentioned in the book as a possible factor in band's early development and Syd Barrett's departure. That book is not typical band's biography, so you might be interested maybe to take a look at it. It shows some interesting angles into especially earlier years of Pink Floyd. For example, attaching Animals album to punk movement in UK at the time. For what might have sparked interest of MI5 or FBI into taking a closer look to Pink Floyd and its influence, you don't need to go very far. Just take a look at the Roger Waters lyrics on Us and Them, as he writes, cynically, "Forward, he cried from the rear, and the front rank died." This is really brutal description of the way generals are mercilessly sending young men to war to die on front lines. On the Final Cut album in 1983, the song The Fletcher Memorial Home depicts imaginary retirement home for incurable tyrants, specifically calling out leaders like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. And since the government was deep in unpopular war at the time, it was really serious anti-war propaganda that they just couldn't think it's nothing. Another very obvious attack on the government and establishment is the 1977 Animals, which really attacks capitalism as it is. The pigs which are portrayed there are hypocritical, power-hungry rulers. The dogs are cutthroat businessmen, and the sheep, of course, are mindless masses which just follow what put in front of them. That famous image of the inflated pig flying over Battersea power station in London became this iconic symbol of defiance against establishment The message it sent was very clear. The whole system is rigged and meant to help only the few selected at the top. And this leads us to the most prominent, most significant part of this possible accusation of secret services against Pink Floyd, and that will be their magnum opus, The Wall. The most famous song from the album, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, was the one that hit number one across the globe and became a protest anthem for school children everywhere. We don't need education, we don't need mind control. That was a direct hit on conformity and state-run education, which was a pillar of establishment. The album, of course, carried even larger themes than that, but this was the essence of message of rebellion, which was loud and clear and deeply alarming to every agency that was supposed to keep everything in order for the establishment. This story is not just about history. This urge from different secret services to keep an eye on influential voices, it never goes away. In recent years, Roger Waters was very prominent in public and controversial political statements on global conflicts, and it has earned him a new kind of condemnation and political backlash. Powerful people on the side of the government and business will always be threatened by the powerful voices that could challenge them.